Why niggas ain't got real hobbies anymore?
Why exactly is it that no one seems to have real hobbies anymore? When I talk to people about what they do for fun, most of the time all they can show me is a meme that they saw.
Right? That I was literally just about to say that. On the tone, I was literally just about to say that people's hobbies is being on social media, bro, and like watching TikTok. I was literally about to say that. Literally. Why do people not have things that they do for fun anymore? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I mean, personally for me, I think people are scared to even do things. Like, here it is. Choice. Paralysis of choice. When you have too many options to do things, right? But here's another thing you need to take into consideration. It's the fact that most people do not trust themselves to make, quote unquote, the right choice, right? So now we have a generation of people who are what they deem to believe that, yo, this could be fun for me to enjoy, making puzzles or knitting or whatever the case might be. They'll be like, I don't know if I should do that because no one in my specific circle of friends is doing that. So I can't deem it as interesting or cool for me to do. So I'm gonna just lay back and I'm gonna just be on the internet. You know what I mean? It's like people are scared to trust their own choices of what they deem to be fun, even though they're quote unquote interested in it. You know what I mean? Okay, let's get into the
on the internet or tell me about the latest show they've watched on Netflix. And honestly, folks, I find that kind of sad. And it makes me think that we're living through the slow death of hobbies. And that is the subject of today's video. First, if you don't know me, I'm Spencer, and I like to talk about simple living, frugality, and digital minimalism. So first, let's talk about the disappearance of hobbies, where this all started. One of my favorite authors is Jack Kerouac, and I just love reading his work because he lived a very inspiring and exciting life. The guy hopped trains, he was a mountaineer, he spent a lot of time at poetry readings and jazz clubs. He practiced Zen Buddhism, and he even spent time as a fire lookout. And with all of that, he still found time to write all of his books. In my mind, that is truly living. That is sucking the marrow out of life. Jack Kerouac said it best. He wanted to burn, 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 just like a Roman candle, and that he did. And compare that to today, where the average person is spending 4 to 6 hours of each day staring at their screens. Back then, authors like Jack Kerouac and even Edward Abbey, another person who I'm a huge fan of, they were highly critical of television because they knew that staring at that glowing screen was a trap. And the way that we have glued ourselves to our screens in 2025, it's the same thing, except it's even worse. And while some people could argue that watching Netflix, like watching movies and shows, is partly a hobby, I would beg to differ. Look, if you spend hours a day watching Netflix, I don't think you're necessarily a cinephile, okay? I'm not trying to be judgmental, and you definitely can watch movies and get value and pleasure out of those things. I'm not going to argue that. I work in the film industry. But for the average person, they don't give you any sense of accomplishment or meaning, and I think we've almost numbed ourselves to all of this content that we don't even really get much value from it at all. For the most part, watching content like that, it isn't a hobby, it's just another way to fill time. And that's unfortunately what most of our lives have been.
This is true. The point that you made there is actually very valid. I think if you spend most of your days watching Netflix and then you're calling yourself a cinephile, I think that is actually incorrect. Because I think a true cinephile can take what they consume and then apply it to whatever sort of outlet that they do have. You know what I mean? If you're just a plain old consumer, you just consume things to consume things and then you're not regurgitating it out in some way, I think you can't actually call yourself a cinephile. Now, that might open up a discussion for debate, but I honestly, when I say that I'm watching Netflix for 6 hours, I'm not just watching Netflix. I'm paying attention to the font. I'm paying attention to the directors of the films. I'm paying attention to the actors in the film. I'm paying attention to the subtext, to the soundtracks, to the colors, to the contrasts. I'm paying attention to how they layer the scene with multiple different objects. I'm paying attention to maybe there's so many things I'm paying attention to versus just consuming to consume. You know what I mean? And I don't just watch Netflix. I'll literally download movies from the 1950s in black and white, Japanese cinema, because that is, when you get to that point where you're downloading 1950s cinema, I think then you can call yourself a cinephile. You know what I mean?
And I guess in a sense, hobbies are another way just to fill your time, but it's a way that you're not going to feel regretful about spending it. So why is it that hobbies are disappearing, or at least flattening, to the point that everybody is pretty much spending their time in the same way, looking at their devices? Honestly, I think the main reason that hobbies are disappearing is because of the fact that boredom itself is disappearing. We used to have this almost acute boredom, you know, where there was actually this, I have nothing to do but stare at the wall and watch paint dry, essentially. There's literally nothing in front of me to occupy my time with. There was nothing better to do either, so you filled that time with a hobby. Of course, you could just watch TV, and that time you could stare at a glowing screen, just like people like Edward Abbey and Jack Kerouac critiqued people for doing, but at that time, we weren't carrying around that type of device on our person at all times just to fill boredom whenever it came up. Nowadays, we don't have that level of acute boredom because when boredom arises, we can fill that with our devices. We have this endless stream of content that we can occupy ourselves with, content that really doesn't motivate us to do anything more but consume. And that's the problem, I think. Our phones don't really kill boredom, but they kind of perpetuate that new kind of constant chronic numbness. That constant stream of content is not going to give you fulfillment. And I think that's why people feel so lost and so isolated and meaningless with our devices, even though we're more connected than ever, because we've actually lost the thing that feeds us, that gives us any sort of fulfillment at all. There's also a second part to this. Another thing that I think is to blame with the loss of hobbies, and I think that is hustle culture, and it's a statement on our economy. One of the reasons that hobbies are kind of dying out is because people are turning their hobbies into something that they can monetize as a side hustle so they can get by. In my mind, there is a difference between a hobby and a job, even if you like the job you're doing. Hobbies don't really have any pressure around them. They're supposed to be an activity that allows you to disconnect from all those stresses and relax yourself. And I think in a way, side hustle culture has kind of poisoned the idea of doing something.
And you know what? That's what happened to me when it came to music. It's like, I turned something that was fun for me, something that I would go to the studio and just enjoy making without any sort of pressures, into what I wanted to be my full-time job of like, oh, I gotta make money from this. We gotta do shows, we gotta tour, we gotta release records. And then like, it sucked out the whole fun from everything. Like everything stopped being like fun anymore. You know what I mean? Just like messing around in the studio at 3 a.m, you know what I mean, with your homies, off whatever things you've consumed. That was interesting. That was fun. And then for doing that for 10 years, it's lost its fun because now the pressure is surmounted of like, oh, something needs to come out of this. And it's like, no, I think, and now more than ever, I'll show you guys because I'll be posting my music and things on my channel now. And it's like, you'll be able to see of like, okay, I'm doing this again for the fun of it. You know what I mean? Let's get back into the video.
Just for the fun of it. If you paint and you paint well, people tell you to start selling them on Etsy. If you like photography, then hey, you should get into taking wedding photos. And hey, of course it's great to make a living doing something that you love, but not everything in your life should be about money. I think it's important to pick a couple of hobbies in your life, things that you enjoy doing, that you completely disconnected from the profit motive and that you can just enjoy for the fun of it. So with that, folks, what do we do? How do we get back in touch with real hobbies and finding things that bring us fulfillment outside of our devices? First, you need to get real on what constitutes a hobby. To start, scrolling is not a hobby, and I don't think Netflix really counts as a hobby either. Shopping should not be considered a hobby. Hyper-consumerism and infatuation about the next thing to buy should not be considered a hobby, and we should not be giving people any praise for doing that. Now, another great YouTuber who made a video on this topic, according to Nicole, check out her channel if you haven't. She's a Toronto local and she's great. In her video, she said that cooking and exercise should not count as hobbies either. And I'm a little...
Shout out to Canada, Vancouver, Toronto. I'm up in Vancouver now, boys. We up in Van City.
Bit mixed on that. Her points definitely make sense. She's saying things like exercise, things that you should be doing for your health anyway, just kind of as that bare minimum to be a healthy, happy person, and things like cooking, just getting food and preparing it so that you can live, those shouldn't be hobbies. They're a sad excuse for a hobby, at least in her point of view. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think that things like that can definitely be great starts to hobbies, and you can have multiple different things that light you up, that you spend your time doing, that you're interested and curious about, and I think exercise and cooking complex kind of fun foods, that can be something there for sure. Where I agree with Nicole is that I don't think that should be your only thing. I think ultimately you should work to have a few different hobbies that you like to do, so you're able to do these things throughout your days and fill your time with pleasurable activities that give you fulfillment. If your entire life is just looking at your phone, watching streaming services, and then cooking a meal or maybe going for a run, that's the only things that you do.
Right, but I think for most people what it is, it's FOMO. I think it's fear of missing out. I think some people truly believe that if they are doing their quote-unquote hobbies, that they won't necessarily, that they'll miss out on the next cool party, the next big DJ event. So I think it's just more out of fear, bro. I think it's just more out of fear of like, people are just scared to just be themselves more than ever. I think it's just scared of being themselves because it's like being yourself nowadays is scary because you can't curate it. You can't like go out and do something about that's a hobby and like curate the best slight moment to be like, oh, boom, post it on the gram. It's like, no, the hobby should take you away from being from your phone. So it's like, I think now more than ever, the idea of having a hobby, it's too vulnerable for people. I think people are so caught up with this idea of being able to edit their entire lives down to this sliver of highlighted moments that I think the hobby takes away from that. I think the hobby becomes, you're too open to public ideas and perception and public judgment, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's probably not going to ultimately be enough, but there's no reason to say that learning how to cook like a chef at a restaurant or getting a really built-out fitness regimen couldn't be part of your hobby portfolio, let's say. But going beyond that, trying to find out what hobby is best for you, I think you need to start by looking backward. Think back to a time before we were all glued to our phones, and think about those activities that you liked doing then. If you're young enough that you don't really remember a time where that was the case, then just think back to when you were a kid. Did you like going out on hikes and looking at bugs and watching the clouds go by? Or maybe you like doodling and drawing, making funny pictures. That's something that I like to do. You might not find all of your hobbies this way, but it's a good place to start. Another thing that you can ask yourself is, if money didn't matter, what would I like to do with my time? In my case, it's things like playing guitar. guitar or hiking or wildlife photography. But what if you've gotten to a point where you just feel so disconnected from the things that bring you meaning and purpose that you don't even know where to start when it comes to new hobbies? Here, I think the best thing to do is to just have some fun, try to be curious, and explore some new things. Something that I can suggest from my own life is just taking a class on something that you're even remotely interested in and trying it out. For my birthday this year, my girlfriend put me in a Japanese mending class called Sashiko Mending. This was basically something that was supposed to take me a little bit out of my comfort zone so I could learn a new thing, but it was also aligned with something that she knew was an interest of mine, which was mending my clothes and making them last. Sashiko Mending is a Japanese style of mending garments where you're actually just sewing a design as well into the fabric that you're adding to your garment to kind of give a nice, beautiful look to it while also repairing and making that fabric last. The class took a couple hours on a Sunday. I had a great time meeting some new people who were also interested in similar things. I learned a little bit of skills along the way, and it gave me a little more confidence while I'm mending my clothes. That being said, I can't say I'm an artist when it comes to Sashiko Mending, not at all. The other thing that I did this year was I gave my girlfriend a pottery class for both of us to take for her birthday. Pottery was something that we both wanted to try. We both kind of have this idea of having all of our dishware made by hand, made by us, which I thought would be really fun, and this was a good way to get started and to learn the ropes.
It's very interesting and also very, what do you call that? Do people still use
now
the
I can
word
say
hipster? Is hipster still a thing? Are we still using that word? I don't know, but it's a very hipster thing to do. What do you just say?
That class, I am definitely not a master potter by any stretch. We did a hand building class, so we weren't using a wheel or anything like that, but I did make this little espresso cup out of the whole thing, and I'm pretty happy about how it turned out. It's definitely a little bit funky, but it's mine, and I can drink out of it. Now, am I going to become a professional potter after doing this? Is this going to become a lifelong hobby of mine? No, but it doesn't also have to. You don't have to put a lot of pressure on a hobby like that it's something that you have to do every single day or every week or every month even. Hobbies really just have to be doing something that you're excited or curious about, and that could be anything, and it doesn't have to be one thing all the time. I do think that we are seeing a slow death of hobbies as we see more and more people just moving to using their devices for every little bit of how they interface with the world. I think we're seeing this flattening where everybody pretty much is just doing the same thing to pass the time. And I think that's sad. The truth is that everybody knows that looking at a screen isn't fulfilling. And the reason that we have a mental health crisis in our world is in part because of that fact. But folks, the solution really isn't complicated. Put down your device and just follow anything that you're curious about and just do that thing for the fun of it. There should be no pressure to make any money at it. And I can tell you from experience, you don't even have to be good at it. You just have to have fun, because that's
Okay, well, I mean, what he's saying has absolutely full on makes a lot of sense, because yeah, what he's saying exactly is true. It's like, I think when we try to put too much pressure on everything that we're doing and try to be like, oh, it has to be about money, we have to make money from it. It's like, if you're not making money from it, it's this. And I think that idea of having to make money from it, I think it stems from a parent's perspective, but also I think it stems from just like society as a whole, where it's like people will judge you for doing X, Y, and Z. But I think if you already have another source of income, then why can't this thing just be like something that I do on the side? You know what I mean? It's like all my other needs are met with all these other jobs that I have, or this job that I have. So why can't I do X, Y, and Z that I want to do now without the pressure of it being something that has to be monetized? Because the hustle culture and everything that he stated, it's essentially it's sucking us out of this idea of self-fulfillment into this idea of like everything has to be this capitalist gain of, oh, you got to make money from it. But it's like, dude, when you really stop and you really think about it, the idea of making money has been attached to the idea of self-fulfillment and self-worth. That's the downside of money. The downside of money is that people attribute the money that they make to their self-worth. And so then they get caught up into this rat race of thinking that like, if I have more money, I have more self-worth. But what they don't end up realizing is that most of the time when people make more money, they feel less adequate. That's all.